that transformation catch up is going to continue to happen with restaurants. And that will help, at least on the marketing side for us. But it really is about personalization. So we've talked about this before. Loyalty, everything else just spams you. Like restaurants, we spam people constantly. Hey, here's a BOGO. Valerie will love a BOGO. Why wouldn't you love a BOGO, right? You know the information, the data, everything else. You can use AI, you can use machine learning algorithms to
I actually hate BOGOs.
No, actually,
I'm sorry.
Valerie doesn't. Yes. You might. I don't know.
This is the Snarketing Podcast, for marketers, by marketers, talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie Vespa and Matt Wurst.
Greetings and welcome to the 13th episode of the Snarketing Podcast. I'm your co-host, Matt Wurst.
And I am the other co-host, Valerie Vespa.
Are you laughing because I almost called myself host?
Yes. It's been a little while.
Yeah, we were out of practice. It's been a few weeks, but I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to connect. This is our Thanksgiving episode. So in 1 minute or less, Valerie, can you tell me what you're thankful for?
Outside of the givens, which are family, a loving family, employment, and health, for the most part. Most recently, I'm very thankful for gluten-free options for my son who has celiac that still taste delicious. And I'm very thankful for cute animal videos on Instagram to break up the very difficult, heavy feeds that I see on my Instagram as of late.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. I am thankful for health and personal family safety and, I don't know, just being employed at this point, but also for some of the distractions from the things that are happening in the world. And I can't imagine how challenging it is to be someone who speaks on behalf of a brand, given what's happening in the world and in the Middle East and on college campuses and everywhere. But those are creative challenges. Those are strategic challenges for brands. For personal, we just all got to get through the day each day.
I totally cannot agree more.
And just so you guys know, I'm thankful for you and that you created me as your AI announcer this year. So with that, let's welcome our guest, Terrell, who is well known as a CMO and executive in the restaurant, hospitality, and CPG spaces. And he's really funny. So be prepared to laugh and learn. Take it away, Val and Matt.
Casey, welcome to the Snarketing Podcast. Are you sure you knew what you were getting into when you signed up for this?
Well, it combines three of my favorite things, which are snarky things, portmanteaus, which I absolutely love, and marketing. So, yes, I think I did.
We're 13 episodes in, and you are the first person to recognize the portmanteau that came and as the origin of our name. So thank you for that. That's probably good enough for you to win Guest of the Year, but the nominations are still being received, and the voting will be counted offline. But welcome, thank you for being here.
Yeah, this is a house of learned doctors, so not that hillbilly stuff.
Well, so
going into family business, Matt.
Let's talk about the education, because I did not know this, and you and I have known each other for some time, but I did not know that, like a certain cousin of mine, you are a graduate of the United States Military Academy.
At West Point.
At West Point. Do you have to include the at West Point?
Apparently you do. It's like Columbia now says Columbia University in the city of New York. I don't know why, what the other ones are, but apparently there are other ones. But no, we always tease the Naval Academy about this, yes.
Well, how did you end up choosing that as your path? Was this something that you knew growing up, that you wanted to be trim and proper in every possible way?
I mean, it's the uniforms, obviously. So my parents met. My mom this is kind of a crazy story. My mom is from Manhattan. Her dad was with JCPenney for like 50 years when it was based out of New York. A guy started as like a secretary and ended up running all of real estate. Kind of a wild story. When they moved to Dallas, it broke his heart because it was very much a New York company. So she grew up Upper East Side in Sutton Place. My dad was from San Francisco, born and raised. They met in Vietnam. My mom was essentially a nurse, Red Cross volunteer. My dad was a helicopter pilot, and they never, ever would have crossed paths, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. So that's a whole story in itself. So we grew up military family.
Wow.
So my brothers were all, military officers. I think we fought in every war in this country's history. So it's, I think, time for somebody else.
Well, I would say thank you for your service, but it sounds like it may not generationally stop with you. I don't know.
Probably not. Yeah, I mean, we grew up with a lot of stories. My dad had some crazy stuff that he had done. So yeah, but I have 3 older brothers. They're all military officers. One was a Marine. The other 2 were in the Army. So yeah, we just kind of grew up with a military background.
So like, how did that training, that education, that service sort of help you as you kind of transferred that to corporate America?
Yeah, I mean, I was more of the creative humanities side, and going to West Point, you're at least at the time, we were forced to do an engineering track of some kind. And so it forced you into analytics and numbers, and we took like Calc 2 and Physics 2 and thermodynamics and all this stuff that was not my first choice on things. But then I did a major in art history, philosophy, and literature to kind of ground myself out. It was really funny. I mean, Dr. Samet, who's an absolutely amazing chick, she still lives in the city, has written a bunch of books about cadets and Army officers and poetry and all these interesting things. It was this nice refuge to leave the academic area and the military side, and then you go into the humanities academic rooms, and it's like, a PhD from Berkeley, and Dr. Samet was from Yale, and it was like just totally different, which was nice. So it was good, kind of left brain, right brain. So taking that into corporate America was, people always joke, they're like, I'm an English major, would you like fries with that? But I use it all the time. I'm within marketing. I think marketing was the one discipline or department where you can take creativity and numbers and you mash them together and fool people into buying things they don't need.
Well, you had me at French fries. And I think that is an interesting transition as we get into just you and your background. Having just wrapped up a stint as CMO at SPB Hospitality, which listeners may know or may not know, but is the umbrella company for many, many, many restaurants, from Crystal and casual QSR all the way up to J. Alexander's, my in-laws' favorite restaurant in Palm Beach. But
same, mine as well.
In this vast experience, now, as we start to think and go back and trace your roots, how has the marketing landscape in the restaurant and hospitality sector evolved really in your time in this last decade?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. So I did an MBA, finished in 2011, and then it was right when 3G Capital bought Burger King. So we went in, and there was, I think, 30 or 40 of us. It started out with 7 floors. By the time I left a couple of years later, there were 2. So just cut to the bone, but it was this obsession with data analytics, really kind of they ran it more like an investment bank, and unbelievably smart people at 3G. But it was a tough place to work, but I learned a lot. But I saw social, digital, all those things weren't a thing then. 2011, I remember like people had Facebook, it had been out, but there was still no way to really like monetize or advertise yet. And it was this cool, we should be posting on social media. That's kind of neat. But yeah, but we're going to spend we're going to buy like 700 GRPs a week on linear broadcast and, all of billboards and all the traditional stuff, right? So it was interesting having to learn that stuff on the fly. And I felt like there was this generation of marketers around the time that had to learn digital and learn, apps and MarTech and technology, all of these things, while still understanding a basic media plan and what GRPs are and explain that to franchisees for us and all that. So you come in and none of that stuff is really, it's just not as prevalent. I mean, we're trying to get people off of broadcasts or traditional things and into more digital. But that's what I've seen the landscape change. The other side too is that there is no marketing and then IT. They are one and the same. So you have to know tech. You have to know how Agile works, how you get an app launched. You need to know what a Facebook SDK is just to do your job. So I would say marketing is more just customer experience, period, overall. I have a guest, by the way. My 5-year-old came in. She snuck in through the door, which is very sneaky. But anyway.
We welcome all guests.
and I didn't see anyone actually enter, so I figured either it was a ghost or someone at a very vertically challenged. So, anyway,
I mean, I would like to say it's her military training that we've started off. It's very
Well, I remember one of the first
Absolutely not.
conversations, Casey, you and I ever had. It was on a Zoom call probably during COVID, and I remember looking behind you, terrified to see a toddler basically hanging upside down from a treadmill. So I hope you have child-proofed your home since then.
It's an obstacle course, and it is good for their lives. I thought, look, we were all latchkey kids. You were just like, hey, just go outside and do something. Now it's stay inside and be dangerous.
So having worked with so many brands and obviously understanding the competitive landscape, like, in that specific kind of QSR restaurant business, what do you think sets, a successful marketing campaign from another? Like what sets something apart?
I mean, the easy answer is data and analytics and looking at your customer persona and all of those things. That is true. But I think the more I've gotten into this side is more of the behavioral science and psychology that we don't tap into enough. So that why people are a chemical algorithm. We just are. We like to think that we are. No, that the smell of Cinnabon in the mall doesn't affect me. It 100% does. Mm-hmm. So if you can ground a lot of things in that behavioral science and get those trigger points, I think that's ultimately what makes it. With AI, and I'm with a group called Rad AI that's got a really cool tool that I think is going to help revolutionize some of this stuff, but it'll actually scan your creative with an AI. And it's based on a social listening natural language processor scrape to find personas about your brand. So it takes that, okay, this is who those people really are, what they really say, because we all know what surveys are like. Surveys can be biased, who knows? Then it scans the creative and says, yeah, this is going to resonate or it's not. So I think that'll be next. I don't want to say it's going to be idiot proof, but much less subjective about this is good creative or not, or a good campaign or not.
Well, so on the flip side, then the question I would think, or I'm curious about, since your CV going back the last 15 years looks like the 10 places I recently ate lunch or dinner, from BK to Outback to LPQ, focus brands. What are some of the biggest myths or misconceptions about the industry that as an outsider you see and you're like, if only you knew?
Right. I think the biggest is between marketers themselves, right? Between CPG marketers and kind of those bigger. So I worked at AB InBev and, really amazing group of people. Again, that 3G mentality about data and keeping things, EBITDA focused, blah, blah, blah. But, super, super smart people. But still talking with people that were on the brands. And we had 600 bars and restaurants that we own globally that people don't know about. They were like Budweiser clubs in China, stuff like that. That's what our team ran. Yeah. So it was, you guys are very fast and very tactical, but we're more strategic and we're longer, we're bigger thinking. That's kind of like this split between retail marketers and CPG marketers. And then retail and food's especially fast and kind of crazy, that we can't be strategic because we're just going so fast. Oh, you just throw out a new LTO. And then we'll kind of throw back to the CPG people. Well, you have a new scent of Tide that you're going to roll out every 2 years. That's not hard. And so there is a little bit of this rivalry and misunderstanding about the two. But I think if you can combine both together, it's a bit more difficult within retail because it's sales and traffic, man. It's a knife fight on the street. So if you can't say, well, I have a product pipeline that's 2 years in and I can't roll this out right now. I haven't had the Kantar research back. I haven't no, you got to go. So that's a little bit of, I think, the misconception.
Please pardon this brief pause as I read some words from our sponsor. The Snarketing Podcast is brought to you, in part, by Secret Deodorants and Antiperspirants for Women. Secret aluminum-free deodorant provides up to 48 hours of odor protection that is free of metals, parabens, dyes, alcohol, and talc. Let's just say, that's no secret.
So sustainability and the rise of people talking about that, and how do you integrate that into your business? How do you think restaurants in the hotel business are adapting to marketing and appealing to sort of the eco-conscious consumer? Because obviously that's really important to many at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big push of ours at Le Pain Quotidien. I get to say it in practice with Francais. That's right. It's funny.
So I've been saying it wrong.
Thing.
Me too. Yeah.
It is fun. People are like, the pain? What's the pain? You kind of die inside. No, our social media manager, Lexi, had this really funny thing that she would put up. It was a user comment that said, I lie awake at night in fear that someone will force me to say in public, Le Pain Quotidien. You're like, that was always our mantra. But no, so that was a big thing for us, was good for the planet, good for you. But the space that we were in, Pret was trying to do the same thing. There's a lot of brands that are trying to do that. But it is also a lot more expensive. Those price points are much higher. Our golden rule in food and bev is you try to stay to a 30% food cost. Otherwise, the flow through and the EBIT, like the model doesn't work, right? And so trying to get to sustainability in some things I'm personally extremely passionate about. And eventually it's going to have to happen, whether we accept it or not. But, outside of the US, Jo Blondell, who I used to work for, she ran McDonald's and Burger King in the US. And they had much more, or in the UK, sorry. They had much more organic things, much more on the farm to table side. And a lot of it was just the regulation of Europe and the UK, but something that customers just demanded. Getting to it at scale is going to be very difficult. But I think that it's the march towards that. What we can't do is, there are people that, a lot of our society, that cannot afford a $10 or $12 hamburger, right? That at that price point is a luxury item. So it does become a bit of the, inequality of food is kind of crazy to think about, but it's true. I mean, you'll go into neighborhoods that do not have grocery stores and they only have fast food joints, and it's because they can't get the economics to work, or so they say. And so I think that we, nourishing food is a human right. It's something that we should all be striving for. And climate change and everything else, we're going to have to pay the piper eventually. So I think that a lot of brands are trying to move towards it, but we do need a big push on how you make the economics of it work.
Is that harder in a franchise model where you have to
Yes.
get buy-in from? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because right off the top, these guys are paying royalties. They're paying ad
Right.
funds and they're paying royalties. So when I say, corporate stores at this, they're automatically taking a 10% haircut.
So do you think then, given the pace and the rate of change that is happening just from a technological perspective, right? You mentioned the AI project that you're working on, which sounds rad, by the way. Are there emerging technologies? Yeah. Are there emerging technologies or platforms or ideas that you think will revolutionize marketing in hospitality sooner rather than later?
I think so. I mean, at Focus Brands, I led digital transformation, and the saying or the mantra from our CEO Jim was, he had come from Hilton, that restaurants were like 10 years behind even hotels, and hotels were a little bit behind, say, like Delta, or some people who are really mad. We talked about this, but I think that transformation catch up is going to continue to happen with restaurants, and that will help, at least on the marketing side, for us. But it really is about personalization. So we've talked about this before. Loyalty, everything else just spams you. Like restaurants, we spam people constantly. Hey, here's a BOGO. Valerie will love a BOGO. Why wouldn't you love a BOGO, right? You know the information, the data, everything else. You can use AI. You can use machine learning algorithms.
I actually hate BOGOs.
No, actually, Valerie doesn't. Yes. You might. I don't know. You might just want points, or you may have just come in anyway. You didn't need anything. So I think that there's a lot on that side that will help. It's always going to just be really tight margins within all of retail. I mean, I've worked at a specialty retailer before as a CMO, and again, a little bit better than food, but it was still tight. I mean, you're trying to tell that you sell a barbecue grill, margins are always going to be a little rough.
So now that you have a moment to pause and look back at everything that you've accomplished, and it's quite an impressive.
It's staggering.
Resume.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, so now let's stop thinking and
No,
start.
sorry, that was completely
How do you
nonsense.
stay so humble?
I don't know. I mean, I think being humble, you just have to be humble about it. I think the best way when you talk about yourself, though, is to put your hand on your chest and close your eyes and say, I just really want to thank the children. No, I do have a motto of don't believe your own bullshit. So I think it's funny. I think that is a good thing that I have a text thread with a bunch of West Point Army buddies. And if you do anything publicly, you are absolutely roasted. Like my LinkedIn is just on fire with these guys, but it's all, they keep what's in the group. It's like it's my own personal Friars Club on here, right? And it does kind of ground you because you're like, man, I really need to say and do things where I don't sound like a complete asshole. And they keep you grounded in a good way.
That is
so
bullying is a
to
good thing.
West Point, then I should have gone to West Point because that would have kept my ego in check. That's lesson learned.
I think it knows no bounds.
Matt, I'm happy to start a text thread to critique your posts offline.
I would appreciate that. Yeah, I think the algorithm speaks for itself. Most of them get ones of impressions, and then every once in a while, one takes off, and I'm like, "What did I do? That was a mistake."
Well, it's like the old Roman triumph days with generals, where they would, if you got a triumph as a Roman general, you rode into the city with all of your spoils and everything else, and a slave would ride on the chariot with you with this golden wreath over your, the laurel over your head. You'd paint your face red to look like Jupiter. It's this whole thing, and the slave's job was to whisper in your ear, "You are not a god. You are not a god." And it's kind of crazy. I think humans need. Yes, there's thousands of people cheering for you. You just had this amazing triumph, but you know what? Don't get over yourself. Get over yourself.
Right.
That should be a role at many big companies who just sit right to the left of a CMO or a CEO and just say that exact same thing. Because
you're not a god.
Yeah. You might see longer tenures at an executive level. You might see,
or shorter.
Better. Well, well, if they're certainly not a god, there are many alternatives to what they could be.
So I did just play into the whole TikTok challenge or a TikTok, whatever it was, of how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And my friend who works at TikTok, Jenna, texted me that immediately. And I said, obviously every day, and then went into this entire, and I became the meme. So.
Is this like a West Point thing? Because like that whole TikTok thing that blew my mind. I had no idea where this came from.
I think it's a guy thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think it's just a guy thing. But yeah, but the challenge back I did see that was funny was the female version of that is Victorian England. And you're like, all right.
Oh, all right.
James, a lot of that. You're like, all right, I think it does go both ways.
I'm surprised that didn't happen during the Downton Abbey craze. I feel like that would have been a great supporting marketing opportunity.
They missed out. They should have used machine learning AI.
So
if only it was available then.
So if you were stranded on a desert island, what would be your favorite meal from either any of the places that you've worked at, or I guess you could pick your own?
Oh man.
I think it should be at any of the restaurants he's worked at.
Okay, yeah, answer that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think if you walk in with competitors' stuff, like we had people when I worked at LPQ that would walk in with Pret cups, and I think our CEO would like smack it out of their hand, like, "What are you doing?" Yeah, like they're like, but it's downstairs. You're like, they're the enemy. They're not. They're lovely people.
That's a no-no. It's like that's at an agency when we work with Coca-Cola. Your neighbors. And if they were coming in the office and someone had a Pepsi product, like they would send out emails like, "Clear your desks."
De-Pepsify everything. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I am a huge fan, and it's terrible because I try to be really healthy, but Aussie cheese fries, man, from Outback, dude, those are so good. That and Alice Springs chicken. I think I would probably go with Outback food just because it's so. I loved it, and I still have a bunch of pals there. And then Carrabba's too is kind of my number two. My buddy Bronze runs marketing there, and he has the greatest name ever, Bronze Major. His name is Bronze Major. And I'm like, that's like Max Power or like Trent Steele or something.
He should,
or some sort of West Point,
he should
honorary medal that you earn.
This is the Bronze Major.
Yes, that's
society.
Right. So I'm willing to bet that you have traveled to some pretty interesting or exotic locations. What is the most interesting place you've been and had a meal, and what was it?
Wetumpka, Alabama, hands down. I'm just kidding.
Birmingham?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, that's always my go-to. Yeah, one time I went to Birmingham. Interesting places. It's a good one. It's not so much a meal as it was a drink. So my brother and I were in Korea at the same time. We're both in the Army at the same time. He was an Apache pilot, which was kind of crazy. Guy went to Penn. So we went.
Can we have him on, Valerie? We're booking the wrong person. We've got the wrong brother.
No. I'm the prep for him, for his ultimate triumph.
You are the Travis Kelce to his Jason Kelce, the far more interesting brother.
Right. You two fighting Quakers get together, the ultimate paradox of a fighting Quaker.
Exactly.
So anyway, there was a bunch of us that were out. We went to a bar in Osan, and the female proprietor came out, and she had what's called a snake shot, which is a big jar with a once live, now dead, cobra wrapped up inside. And there's soju, probably formaldehyde, who knows what's in this thing. And she kind of ladles out the snake shots, and there's scales in this thing and the whole nine. There's a great, very grainy video, because this was like 2004, I think, of out there. And she asked you, do you want to ride the snake? And everybody asked you, I want to ride the snake. And by then we had a few other sojus. And so we all took snake shots in Osan in Korea. And it was unbelievably horrible, but it was a cool experience.
I mean, I'll be honest. Those are the people I want defending my country.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You don't want me, who's afraid to try like mild, because it's too spicy in the chicken wing restaurant.
Yeah, this was next level. I did feel very badly for the snake, but he had since parted the world many years ago.
Amazing. How did you feel afterwards? Did you feel empowered?
I didn't feel it's more what I didn't feel, like my face. So that, yeah. But I'd never experienced soju before, which is a Korean liquor.
Yeah.
And, they'll take a 1 liter of like Mountain Dew and cut the top off, and it's like soju. And then that was the first time I had ever felt really, quote, hammered. I was with guys at a pool hall. There's a bunch of lieutenants and cadets hanging out. And I had 2 of these, and I stood up, and I felt like somebody hammered me back down, and I just sat down in my seat and was like, all right, this is a soju nightmare. Yeah, but that's Korea. I mean, Korea's a fun time.
I got to get there. I feel like I'd fit right in. So if you weren't in marketing, what sort of career do you think you would have taken?
My brother always makes this joke. He used to, when he was single, he used to tell girls at the bar that he was a parade planner. That was his. People were like, "Really?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, big time parade planner."
Everyone loves a parade.
But they're also they're full of hot air, guys. Let's not.
Yeah. But, he would agree. What would I? Oh man, that's a really good question. I think if money, I mean, it's one of those things of like you would do something based on like pragmatism of, I need to earn money, I need to do this. I think I'd probably want to go into like theater or acting or something.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because I really enjoyed that in high school. Yeah, but I would think I was too scared, to try to make. I have some friends that gave it a go and did pretty well, but still, that was one of those things of like, oh, man, I can't. I need to have money, and being like a starving artist wasn't.
Well, of all the interesting things that I see in your background, having gone back further than I wanted to on your LinkedIn profile, running a B&B, like,
yeah,
what was like? That seems like there were some crazy things that you must have seen. What was the most memorable guest experience or story that you either firsthand or secondhand encountered?
Wait, where was this B&B?
It's St. Augustine, Florida. So we had a ghost. It was an 1894 Victorian. So St. Augustine's the oldest city in America.
Yeah.
All the Bostonians that would come visit would disagree, but we're like, sorry guys, we got you beat by like 80 years. So my family bought an old Victorian in town, right downtown, when I was in high school, and we restored the thing together as a family. And it was, when we say restored, it was just us. It was a lot of work. So like, I'd go to football 2-a-days and then come home and then work on the house, like ripping asbestos siding off. And my brothers and I broke up the driveway with sledgehammers, not with like with a sledgehammer. Yeah. In the Florida heat in August. It was great. So this was my oldest brother, because it was on If Walls Could Talk on HGTV, and my oldest brother kind of did the segment, and he was like, it was a labor of love. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's awful. Like, it was a labor of insanity.
Wait, but did you say that it was haunted, by the way? Is that...
It was haunted.
Did you know that before you guys bought it?
No, we did not. Apparently people in the town knew, but like everything in St. Augustine is haunted. I mean, it's from 1565. It's old as hell. So it was Henry Flagler came, put the railroad through, right? One of his he would build houses for his guys. The gentleman that built our house was named Conrad Decker. He was from Boston, had a very successful brewery. I think he was part of the Flagler consortium somehow. And his wife, Sophie, died in the house. So she lived there until like the 20s or 30s. It was 1894 all the way to the 20s. So Sophie was the one that haunted the house, we think. But it was weird things. It was stuff like the room would go cold, and you would kind of feel. I remember when I was in high school, I was in the shower. Of course, Sophie came out the shower. But I had the radio on, and it was on, like old boom boxes, right? And she had turned it. It was on CD mode. I'm dating myself here. And she had switched it, or somebody had, to radio and changed the dial to classical. I didn't do that.
Right,
I was home alone. So we would have guests come down that were like, and it was of course my room. That's where she died. So guests would come down in the morning, and they were like, is there something? And they're like, oh, you probably had a run-in with Sophie.
How do you reconcile, as someone in marketing who has a fundamental reliance on and belief in the data and the science and the insights associated with human behavior, how do you reconcile that with Sophie's ghost?
Well, I mean...
do you have any data or metrics can you back this up with any...
Art, and there's the science, okay, all right? I was looking at the art of this. No, I mean, I think about it, and we're like, there's no way. But part of it is, I think we kind of freak ourselves out. You know what it probably was that I turned the damn radio to classical and didn't remember. But who knows? It was still a feeling. There's something ethereal. There is something weird about that.
There is.
I don't know what it is, but it's you get feelings, you have intuition. But things like rooms going cold and stuff like that has always been kind of weird. So there's your data. I mean, I could have just taken the temperature.
Okay, so causation and correlation, not necessarily. Okay, got it.
I mean, I did have a friend who had, she was not clairvoyant, but she would see things, and I didn't tell her anything about this. She came into the house and sat down in the parlor, because we had a parlor, and said, Sophie's really happy with what you did with the house. Don't be afraid of her. And I was like, how do you know who Sophie is? She was like, everything's fine. That freaked me out.
Oh my God.
And, maybe she went through our dumpster. I don't know, but I don't think she did. Like, digging for clues.
That's
wasn't on like a TripAdvisor review somewhere that she read?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean,
right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, but those were the other funny thing, are just speaking of human behavior. So my mom ran the B&B for like 20 years, and when she passed away, my wife and my brothers and I ran it. But I was kind of the head of this thing because I was the closest. So my wife and I would go back, once a month or so, check in with the staff, make sure everything was okay. But my mom's stories were funnier. So I remember it was like 2 a.m. and the power went off, and we had 8 suites. So there's probably about 20 people in the end at that point. 2 a.m. What do normal people do at 2, 3 a.m? They're asleep. So the power had gone off. All of the guests came down to her room to the innkeeper's room, knocked on the door, and said, "The power's out." My mom said, "Okay." It's like, "Well, what do we do?" I said, "What were you doing?" "Well, we were sleeping." "Well, then go back to bed. You don't need it. It's nighttime."
What did Sophie shout it in their
People are
ear?
funny. They're just funny.
That's really weird.
I hope that Sophie haunted them good that night, because they woke my mother up at 2 a.m.
I have a haunted. I lived in a haunted house as well, and I remember like my friend bringing
Let's
their
hear it.
cat. Oh, I just remember like my friend bringing their cat over to the house, and the cat refused to go in, and there was like no reason, but it was like just like doing the hissing and the like, do not allow me. And I feel like cats have an intuition. And then another time, like one of the couch pillows had like been like, it was like in the kitchen and nobody knew why. And everyone was like, "I swear to you, I'm not messing with you." Like, why is, yeah, it's very odd things here and there. So, and we went to the city hall to try and find history on the house, and they had no history after 100 years, but it's so clearly older than a 100-year-old home. So it was, something happened there for sure.
The guy died 105 years ago. Brutally, horrifically murdered by a cat.
Exactly.
What happened. So,
oh my gosh.
You don't want to know, Valerie. It's like this stupid ghost tale my brothers had when we lived in North Carolina. We moved all the time. There was the baby with the 2 fingers. That was the ghost story in the town. And it was like, okay. And it was like, well, the baby with the 2 fingers is going to scratch you and then you die. And you're like, that was the ghost story. Stupid kids were like, oh, that's...
I mean, but by the way, you guys know there are separate podcasts for this type of ridiculousness, right?
It's true.
Ghost podcast now? We've moved on from... Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, maybe we just need to... we need to find a different outlet for our creativity.
Exactly. Just have storytelling.
Yeah.
I can try and reel this back in, though, with regards to marketing.
I doubt you're capable of it.
But why?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Speaking of,
call this random tangents. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I suppose, supernatural stuff. If you had a superpower to enhance your ability in marketing, what would it be?
Clairvoyance.
I knew you were going to say that.
I would want to know what everyone just what's going to happen, or what is everyone else thinking? Something like that.
Oh my gosh!
Just I feel like in marketing, you're always trying to guess what your customer wants and needs, and you build all these models. And I mean, that's the whole thing with AI is like, how do we take the guesswork out of it? And we'll test and we'll learn and do A/B and all these things. If I just knew, then I would be the most successful person in the history of the universe.
Okay, so Valerie, you did bring it back, and I have one last
That was
question
excellent.
before we go to the lightning round.
So anyway, back to ghost cats. So this ghost cat.
Do not. Nope. I'm putting the guard.
So anyway, so I stopped blasting.
Well, what is, given your penchant for the absurd, what is the most ridiculous creative idea or marketing idea that you've seen actually turn out to be successful, whether you were part of it or not?
Oh, the Noid, hands down.
Never
part of
Little
the
Caesars?
Noid.
Domino's.
Domino's.
Yeah, I don't
The Noid is the most absurd. It is as a child, the greatest ad campaign of all time. A claymation thing with rabbit ears that destroys your pizza. Like, what? And that
should have been like a breakfast cereal mascot, right?
You know how it ended?
No.
It ended here. It ended 5 miles from my house in Atlanta. So there was a guy named, I think, Christopher Noid, who clearly had some mental illness, unfortunately. It was very sad, but he thought that Domino's and the CEO were personally attacking and mocking him. So he went to a Domino's in Chamblee, Georgia, and took the place over with a gun and the whole nine. And everybody was fine. I think the staff all ran, but they say they didn't end the Noid campaign because of that, but I think they did because of that. But you're somehow, this claymation cartoon character gets turned into The voices are telling me everyone's out to get me.
You're mocking me. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's pretty
They say
wild.
there's no bad PR. I think there might be.
Yeah. That and the one that I was personally more involved with was the King. So the King was obviously a little bit before my time. But at Burger King, we had a lot of fun with the King. And it was just the creepy plastic face and everything. He retired for a little bit, then we brought him back. But when he retired in 2011, my buddy John Berberich, he's at Shake Shack now, he and I somehow got a hold of the King's email. We had an email. We were terrible people. But everybody's email addresses at Burger King was your name at whopper.com. So he was the King at whopper.com. I mean, it's still the best email. Terrell at whopper.com is amazing. Mm-hmm. So we would, and you have to remember at the time, there were 7 floors and we only occupied like 2. So there were entire floors of the home, of the RSC, the home office, that were empty. And we called them like the zombie apocalypse floors because they still had people's desks and stuff, and everything was, all the lights were off, and it was like, oh, I need I need a stapler. I'll just go down to 3 and just grab one off somebody's desk. And it was just weird. So we would email friends, people that we're in the trust tree, from the King at whopper.com, and hey, need to see you down on the 3rd floor, or something terrible like that. So people would just get random emails from the King. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I mean, that could have been a campaign, by the way. You're right. Like,
seriously,
the King messing with people. That was that was the creative at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I think it was a surprise and delight kind of thing. They'd used it before, of like randomly, if you won something, you would get something from the King. So like there was an actual business use for it, but it was also a fun way to have it. It was a good time.
Okay. So with that, we are going to transition to our lightning round, which we call Gone in 60 Seconds. It's 6 questions in more or less, usually more than 60 seconds. But the first question, these are the only questions we really prepared, other than like knowing your LinkedIn background. But this one could not have worked out better. And it is, and I will start the clock. If you could swap jobs with any fictional character, who would it be? I think we know the answer.
I would not want to be the Noid. I don't want to destroy everybody's pizza.
Oh, I thought
Or the King. No, it wasn't the
King. Any fictional character?
Any fictional character. It could, you can go beyond email addresses that you've taken over.
Man, Han Solo.
Han Solo, okay. Badass rebel, pirate of the universe. Or the
Killed
galaxy.
by his son. Obviously, my son will one day end me.
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And let's shift this a bit. So, what's your go-to karaoke song for a creative night out?
Don't Stop Believin', Journey.
Okay, good.
Journey.
Live in any city in the world, where would you go?
What'd you say?
Lightning round. I said New York.
Oh,
okay.
Right. I'm not a Brooklyn guy. Yeah.
So maybe you gotta move back.
They were Paris. Paris, London, New York. That's kind of the trifecta. That's a very bougie white man thing to say.
I dig it.
What is your do you have a go-to guilty pleasure food or drink after a long day?
Food, Caramello candy bars.
Ooh.
Caramello candy bars.
I still remember their jingle
Hard
from the
to
1980s
come by.
cartoon or commercials. Caramello, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that it? Wasn't that their commercial? The radio
Yeah, it was.
or something spot?
It could be. Who's going to fact check you?
Right. And you know what? Note to editor, just cut that out if I was wrong.
That, or for Vice, a good California cab. I used to be a big bourbon. I mean, I like bourbon, but I think like having a really good cab is, again, this is like the Gone in 60 Seconds white guy bougie edition, apparently. Yeah.
Brought to you
Je voudrais,
by...
Je voudrais mange du cab.
A lot of French in this episode. We also note to our marketing team to target the French very highly with this one.
Yes. My grandmother's Parisian, so that's why I say she's not. You'll notice I didn't say French. She is Parisian. She will correct you.
Born and raised.
Yeah.
In Ile de la Cité, right?
Yeah. Ile de Cité. Oui. Actually, I should say ouais if I want to sound cool. Ouais.
You've sounded cool the entire episode. So this is our last question. It may have only been 5 questions. Again, who's counting? But call this the one-word challenge. If you had to sum up your marketing philosophy in just one word, can you do it?
Indescribable.
Oh, that is so good. Wow. You pulled it
Yeah,
out.
that's always I love that in interviews, in interview questions. They're like, if you can describe yourself in one word, what is it? I'm like, indescribable. And they're always like, damn it.
Mine is
Didn't even see it
verbose.
coming.
That's I go with verbose, right? It's ironic, but yours was great. As was this entire conversation. Because I feel like we could go on for longer, but the clock on the wall is telling me that we've hit exactly the right amount of time for optimized listening experience. So we're going to wrap it up, but not before we say thank you, and excited to see where, why, how, what, when you continue on your journey and impact in this space. So thanks again for being here.
So great.
This was a lot of fun, and everybody should join. And we should talk more about ghosts and cats.
All right, we'll do
Valerie and
that
I are
after
going
we
to start.
stop.
Yeah. We're
After,
gonna have
after we stop recording, I'm gonna go get a cab. I'm gonna call your Parisian grandma while you guys talk.
Well, that's a wrap. And that certainly got weird, but in a fun way. Thanks to Casey for spending time with us, and to you, our listeners, for always being there. Or even just sometimes being there. Happy holidays to all, and to all, good night.